death and dollars, right? Things that nobody ever wants to talk about. And here we are, these sweet little girls talking about these taboo topics. Hi, Marni, how are you?
Love this for us. Hi, Erica.
Hi. Okay, so when I walk in a room and I introduce myself, I take a deep breath because I know I'm gonna get questions. When I say I'm a financial therapist, I get the like look like, what? I've never heard of that. Talk to me when you walk into a room and you introduce yourself as a death doula, because I know the first time I heard it, I was like, I need to know more. So go ahead.
I know it's one of those things that you get sort of like the eye raise, like the eyebrow raise, and they're like, "What?"
I
And
call it the puppy face, like the death
yeah, like
field. Huh?
really? What is that? What is that? Um, yes, it is definitely a conversation starter. Hopefully, not a conversation ender when you start talking about death. But what I like to say to people is that it is a non-medical professional who helps educate around death, dying, and grief, and really works on both the emotional aspects behind it and the practical aspects. So, a lot of what I do is helping people talk in advance about the future, whether, it is someone in the sandwich generation who is, working or not working and have children of their own and aging parents to be thinking about, and that they're in that like really messy middle of dealing with both and also needing space for themselves, or a lot of solo agers, people who are starting to think about the future and what it looks like, whether they're with someone or not and whether they have children or not. But so thinking about the future and what that looks like and how can we feel empowered to be living our lives the fullest we are now, knowing that we don't know what the clock looks like, and having an empowered death, and what does that mean for you as an individual, because it really looks different for everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so
yeah,
amazing for the word death doula, right? Because I have three teenagers now. My middle daughter, I used a doula through that process, right? To help me
yeah,
through. My first daughter was born in Japan when I lived overseas. Very different experience. My second daughter, I did belly dancing, this real hippie phase, and I got in with the doula and like learned about your body and just different types of conversation of like not to fear, because the messaging that we hear from a lot of parents when you hear about a birthing story is, oh my God, it was the worst pain of my life. Oh, it was horrible.
mm,
Right. And so if we put fear into people about childbirth, it was actually for me, especially my second daughter, was a very beautiful natural birth, like because of the conversations and the work that I did ahead of time with the mindset and with my body nerves endings and all of these things, that
yeah.
fear wasn't there. Like my shoulders were up, I was able to relax and enjoy the process more. And it sounds like that's the work you do on the dying side, because unfortunately it's a part of life, just like money is, right? Is the death part. And you help transition, and that's just so cool. Like you help people with that mindset to not be scared of what's to come.
Yeah, and we're not taught these things in our society. It is a big taboo topic, just like money is. And oftentimes we aren't talking about it and what it means to us personally. And when we're not speaking about things, whether it's in society or within our own families, there can be a lot of fear about the unknown. And so it really can be empowering to just talk about what makes us feel uncomfortable about it or what it means to us. And every family dynamic is different. Some of us, it's been more open conversation within the generations, or just within our family unit or within our friend group, and sometimes it feels very like behind the curtain and you don't want to talk about it, or you weren't taught how to talk about it because your family didn't talk about it. And so by bringing it into the light, making it just as we are born we die, and it's just part of that natural cycle, and to be really thinking about how can we make this feel just part of planning as anything else in our lives. Planning in advance, we often make our better decisions, and we are getting to take charge of what is most important to us. And I think it's also true with what you do, in that when you are thinking about why do I have this relationship with money, maybe it's because how my parents did or didn't talk about money, or things like that. I'll let you speak to that, but it does feel like this sort of thing that if you talk about it more, it takes away some of that fear, and you can live a more empowered life. I know that what I do feels very, you know, some people can be uncomfortable by it, and then they sort of realize why it's so important. I know that you're in a profession that not many people are in, certified financial therapists. I think there are only 100 of them in the world. So talk to me about how you sort of came into this profession, and why it's so important to you to be talking about it.
Right. It's similar to you where you've taken this taboo topic and because of life circumstances, I know from a prior conversation, where you're like, this is a void and a need that needs to be out there. Because and by the way, it's so needed, both from like somebody being diagnosed with cancer, right? At a young age with kids, like how do you help them have those conversations? But also to aging parents, helping them and the children support because these are really uncomfortable conversations for most people. For you, you do it every day, which is why it's nice to lean on experts. And but something that I love to do is connect with people. And you and I got connected through other people saying, you two need to connect. And
Yeah.
I've learned about medical concierge, that help people understand all the
Yeah.
different doctors that they're working with, and we'll put it into real language for you. And then there's assisted living, people that will go look at all these, and because they know the terminology and the talk and what to look for to meet your needs. And before I really started digging into this world, I didn't know how many resources were out there. And I know, like, when my dad passed away, it was about 8 years ago, it didn't feel alone, but I felt alone. I didn't know that there was so much help. And thankfully, I have a support system that we were able to do it, but I know most people don't. And so,
Yeah.
financial therapy, how I came to it is because most people don't have the skills to talk about money in a healthy way because they haven't seen it done before. And I grew up in a home with my dad where talking about money was normal. And it started with like driving to the grocery store. 2 cans of beans are 99 cents. How much is 1 can of beans? And like, and then like we'd pay at the register. And all of a sudden, it just became natural, those small conversations over time. And so when he did pass, I was comfortable with what he had laid out in front of him in the binder. My mom, on the other hand, after 50 years of marriage, knew about the binder but wasn't as comfortable talking about it because she wasn't into those details and those small conversations that we were. And without me knowing, she was my first client.
Mm,
And when I heard the term financial therapy, I have a degree in finance, I've been in consulting for 20 years. It was like the lightning moment went off to say, I can help people take the higher road during transitions. And that could be diplomas, death, diapers, a dress for wedding, all the D's, I call them. And so that's what I do is I help people navigate their own financial relationship and then give them tools to have healthier conversations because inheritances, lining up inheritances, they're really ugly conversations often because people don't talk about it and we're left with assumptions, right? Isn't that what you see as people just don't do the work ahead of time?
yeah, it is astounding how many people aren't having these conversations within their families until it's sort of too late. And it can bring so much more clarity to the next generation if you're, or just your spouse, if you're having these conversations. Where are the bank accounts? What subscriptions do we have? A lot of people who are in partnership have different roles and responsibilities within the family and may not be fully aware of what's going on with the other. And so if someone passes away, it can be a real challenge to figure out those missing pieces. And so a lot of what I'm doing with clients is, taking all that information that lives in our brain that we just do because we're living our lives, and putting it into a safe, secure space, whether it's, a digital vault, or having that, that binder, that important place where you're putting that information so that if someone needs it, they're able to help, figure out what it is that that where they can help. And I think that, to your point, it can cause such discord within families if there's not that conversation about, okay, here are my wishes, these are why this is in place, like this is why this
The
is important
why.
to
Oh my
me
God, the
you
why.
know
Yes.
And if you understand the whys behind decisions, then you're more likely to understand it. Or there can be then follow up questions and it's a real dialogue, as opposed to finding out afterwards something that may be concerning, or it might cause, disagreements within a sibling dynamic, which is not what any parent wants. No one wants to, leave a situation in which people are fighting over things. Like, how can you be having these conversations in advance? And, you know, what happens when someone doesn't have these conversations about money within a family unit? What do you see as sort of like what's left if you're not having these conversations?
So what happens is, especially when I see like a patriarch or matriarch pass away, what I see is a lot of frustration and a lot of unclarity, but I don't think that's a word. Like a lot of confusion, I guess, is really
Yeah,
there. Because what's written maybe in the estate or in the will or whatever the documentation are, one might be outdated because, people aren't going back every 3 to 5 years to update it. So their life situations might have changed, but legally the paperwork says something. And
right.
if it's not divided up equally, there's a lot of assumptions that are made. And so families put so much time and effort when they're living into creating harmony and love and, memories in the family and a good name. And what happens is after they pass, if they haven't had those conversations, or I encourage people to write letters or do a short video of what your wishes are, so that way there's less confusion and hurt feelings, because otherwise people are left really confused and they can't have that closing conversation with you because you're gone.
Yeah, there's like a lack of closure, especially if there is quote unquote like a fairness thing that's at play here.
Yeah,
That
a word that is hard to explain.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're only left with, written words that maybe you don't understand the why behind it, there could be assumptions. And I think something that sort of really ties money and death is the emotions behind it. It's so emotional. Money, like so many of our decisions are made because of the emotions behind it.
90% of our
Um,
decisions are emotional and 10% are logical. Now put on the stress of either a death diagnosis or somebody passing away suddenly. And so now your emotions are heightened and you're possibly
yeah.
grieving and a lot of things that might get stirred up that hadn't been there before. And then you're supposed to think logically of what am I supposed to do with that money? Or where I have a client right now who has a six-figure check sitting for 2 years now in the closet from her father because cashing it has so much emotional ties to it. It means he's really gone. It means what am I going to do with this money? I don't want to put it in this account because, maybe my husband has access to it and I don't want it, like there's all these emotional things. And so she's just burying it, literally
Oof.
sitting there. And as a financial person, I'm like, oh my God, the estate attorney must be going crazy because the check hasn't cleared the trust. And then from the financial therapist piece is, wow, there's a lot to unpack there.
I mean, that is sadly something that happens so much that, people don't know what to do after with money, and that there's a lot of guilt or feelings that come up about like what it means, exactly what you're saying. And the other thing that you touched on is that it sort of holds up the probate process, the estate process, because there are decisions that need to be made that, if you don't have a full understanding of the money behind it or where things are, it can really hold up. An estate can take 6 months to years to get through. And one of the things that I end up doing is helping clients after a loss deal with all those paperwork and logistics, the transferring money from one account to the estate account, to transferring car title, to dealing with all of the little pieces that fall outside what the attorneys do, and to deal with it. But to your point, when someone has lost someone, they're in that fog, they're in decision fatigue, they don't know what to do, whether it's about money or all the other aspects of clearing up someone's estate, and it gets blocked, it gets stopped, and there
And by
can
the
be
way, it's a full-time
yeah.
job. So
Oh yeah.
like you just said that you help people do that. And I gotta say, that's a big aha because especially for me personally, when my dad passed away, it was the first person that I had to deal with all this stuff. So everything was new. So even changing or whatever the airline miles, right? I mean, from the littlest details,
Yes.
I'm starting from scratch because I had never done this before. And so to have a resource like yourself that says, not only have I done this before, this is something that I'm good at. This is what I do. I know questions to ask and resources to go to. So I'm lucky that I have you now in my Rolodex and my contacts, because it's important, you know, because you do get fatigue, I think is what you called it. It's crazy. So let me ask you a quick question. Three things.
Yeah.
I, knock on wood, but if someone we know gets a diagnosis of cancer that it's going, you will pass away in 6 to 12 months,
Yeah.
what are three things that you should do from your perspective?
Um, Definitely create that support system around you. So making sure that you have those friends who are, helping with, the meal train, who will help take you to the doctor's appointments, we do need in moments like that support system that's all around you, to make sure that your emotional needs are met. And really also putting into place those, professionals, whether it's a financial advisor, whether it's the attorney who's making sure that your estate is buttoned up, but it's having, your healthcare proxy and your power of attorney in place so that as things progress, you have someone that you trust who is able to be there and support you and make those decisions for you if you're unable to make them for yourself, just for yourself. So having those, roles and responsibilities figured out, and then it's making sure that you're organized as much as you can. It really is such a gift to whoever is going to be helping you or helping the family after your death. So making sure that your digital life is figured out. So where are those subscriptions? Where are you doing your online banking? Do you have crypto? Who has keys to your apartment? All of these little things, like I said, how is your information organized in a way that will help the next generation? Because the last thing you want is for when you die, for your loved ones who are in grief to have to go on a treasure hunt trying to figure out what it is that they need to figure out. Um, it's it's so emotional, and the last thing you want to be doing is having to do all of these practical things when all you want to do is live as best a life as you can in those last times. Which is why I'm always trying to get people to think about it farther in advance so that it's not in those last moments. But also, beyond the things, it really is, what is your legacy in that moment? Like, are there letters that you want help writing to loved ones? For when you're gone, or is there any sort of ethical will or legacy to be sharing both like your values and your wishes, for those that you love, because it really is, about your connections to this world, that in the end are the most important. Like, you're not going with your money, it's those connections that are so important. So that is more than three, but yeah, I mean, and when you're thinking about, after, if I asked you the same question, what would be, what you would help someone with or their family who is going through this
Yeah,
as it
so
relates to money?
it's similar to yours in a way. I always say a piece of life folder is good, because having, and again, it could be written on the back sheet of a paper, where things are. It doesn't have to be in a fancy binder or, oh, I'm going to wait for a tool. Just, when you're doing your taxes and you're having to gather all your paperwork anyways, write it all down, and tell somebody where it is, right? So, like, my kids know where that piece of paper is. Even though they're not 18 yet, they know where that piece of paper is. So that way, if something happened, they could access it. So I think getting organized and starting the conversations off small, is really important. Is having those conversations. Again, I'll make it personal for me. I want a park bench, after I'm gone. And I want a place where people can sit and be with me and maybe enjoy or hear the birds chirp or just have a quiet moment. And it's funny, my dad would be like, a bum's gonna sleep there. And I'm like, then that's okay. Like, I'm providing shelter for somebody, and like, I want my kids to come and like read a book and just hang out with me. For me, that's, I literally wrote that in the will, but I've told that to my kids as well. And so it's those small moments, I think, that create those conversations, and back to not being as scary is this is how I want to live on and this is how I want to be represented, is important, which creates conversation, which is sometimes really difficult on this topic to even bring up. And so a suggestion would be tough conversations are sometimes easier side by side when you're on a drive, out walking the dogs. You know, in our house, we had a major conversation and everybody was fighting. I have three, I mentioned I have three teenage daughters, right? And we turned all the chairs around, right? So nobody could look at each other and we can have that conversation. So sometimes diffusing that eye to eye contact, that waiting to jump in to talk is helpful. So try that. The other one is create a passcode or a code word. Is these conversations are uncomfortable when we're talking about money, what I'm leaving behind, who I'm leaving it to. If I'm not leaving anything, you might have to talk to your parents about who's going to take care of me in an Alzheimer's treatment center, or, one of those living, and you have to talk to your brother or your sister about it. And having money is one way of a conversation. Not having enough money to support your parents, or your parents having to ask for money, is another tough conversation. And so having those code words like, palm tree or something like that, where you just put a pause and say, hey guys, this conversation is not productive at this point. We're going to take a walk for 5 minutes, or I'm going to go get a glass of water. We're going to come back, and always come back when you come up with the word, have the time that you're going to come back. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. We're going to play a music. I have one couple that uses a song, and after the song's over, they come back, right? They have a dance party. Is move your body to get your brain thinking differently and for your emotions to calm down. So those are also important when you're having these conversations.
I I love all of those. I was telling you earlier that my family's safe word is snuffleupagus. So if we're having an issue and we know that it's turned unproductive, snuffleupagus and we come back to it. And I agree with you. Oftentimes, when I'm working with clients, we are doing a walk and talk, whether it's on the phone together and we're each walking separately, or we're doing side by side. A lot of those important conversations that I've had in my own family are on those long car rides. I think it's such a great way to be. There's less pressure when you're not doing eye contact. These conversations, whether it's about money or it's about, aging or death, they're heavy, but they don't need to be if you create a lighter atmosphere for them, and keeping it a time limit. You don't have to figure out everything all at once. Like, it can be in little chunks, and the more we talk about it, the more normalized it is and the less pressure it is to figure out everything. And the last thing that you said, which is so important, is that this is one of the main reasons to be thinking and talking about these things within your family in advance. Is, yeah, what if parents haven't, whether it's the economy or what's going on, where all of a sudden they're realizing, oh, maybe I don't have enough that I thought I did for retirement or for aging in place, and that might end up falling on the next generation. Well, it's important to be thinking about that for your own finances if you're having to think about your parents and what it means to be helping them if you can. And like you said, once you're in this profession or you're working with other people who are in this general world, you can offer resources. Okay, there are people who help. Think about, what is the right, if you need to be in an assisted living or that dementia center, talking to people who are able to place you based on your finances or what other support is out there. So, really making sure that you're having these conversations in advance so that you can get the support you need in advance of when there's a crisis or something going on.
And you just touched on something, which is financial boundaries.
Mm,
So I see this, we call it the sandwich generation. A friend of mine from Working Daughters, she has a book called Working Daughters, calls it the panini press, right? Because there's no sandwich. We are pressed, right? I mean, we got everybody that needs us, including us, though. And so,
yeah.
yes, you want to take care of your parents in a dementia center or something, or especially I see more and more people getting Alzheimer's at younger ages where their bodies are lasting longer and it's expensive. You have to think about what can you afford and what resources are available. Otherwise, through your family members, through the government, through, the facilities that are out there. Really use a brainstorming session here instead of just thinking that you are the only way to solve it, right?
Yes.
That's not how good problems get solved. It's not just, I got this, I'll figure this out on my own. And if you look at any problem that you've solved in history, right, it's generally done better when you have a board of people to talk to, brainstorm ideas, and to get there. So just think about it. Financial boundary for yourself, it might not even be a word you've ever heard of before, right? Is what can I do to protect myself and my kids from being in this situation as well, but same time be able to give and provide for my family if that's something that you want to do.
Yes, and piggybacking off of that, there is a world in which there is a bad family dynamic that there are already needing to be boundaries in place because, you don't have a great relationship with other members of your family. And for whatever reason it is, like to protect yourself emotionally, you need to have those boundaries in place. And that's okay. Not everyone, there are ways to provide support or to have someone without being that person who is handling everything. And that's okay.
And I think that's exactly it, right? Not everything is financial, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to driving to doctor's appointments. It goes back to maybe somebody needs cleaning out the house. Like there's all those different ways that people can contribute. If they financially can't contribute, maybe they contribute with their time, with their energy, with their resources. Like, so really thinking it through and using the people around you and the resources around you. I think that's so important. I remember when I was going through a difficult time, I was getting divorced. I had three kids under the age of four. And it was said to me, lean on the people around you. It strengthens your relationships. And as somebody who's
Mm,
doing things on my own, I said yes to that. And I look back on those times and those friends that showed up during those days, and it really did strengthen those relationships. So I'm appreciative.
absolutely. And people aren't mind readers. Being able to ask for help when you need it, can make a world of difference in the support that you get.
Okay, I'm gonna give you a tip on that because again, I'm bad at asking for help. So somebody suggested this to me was write down the things that you need help with. So folding laundry, a ride to the doctor, grocery store shopping, picking up a book at the library, like whatever it is, and fold them up or put them on popsicle sticks and leave it by the door. So when people drop over and they say, "What can I help you with?" and you're like, "I don't know," go pick a popsicle stick.
I
Go
love that.
right. I was like, that was such a brilliant idea. And that's for anybody, not just, if you're sick, but also if you I just had a baby, or in a time of need. So
Yeah,
before we go, because you and I could talk forever, let's
totally.
do a quick rapid fire of true and false.
Sure.
All right. Do you only need a will or an estate plan if you're rich?
No, false. Everyone needs one because it allows you to have a say in what happens to the things that are meaningful for you. Whether are a billionaire or you are, a blue collar worker, it does not matter. You have things that are important. So that could be your children and having guardianship or your dog. It could be a baseball collection or, jewelry that was important to you only because of the places that you got them, not necessarily because they have monetary value. So there are things, and it gives you the opportunity to have a say in what happens to your things. And same with, having, a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney in place. That helps you when you're still here and you need that support. Again, it gives you the empowerment to decide who is able to make decisions for you if you're unable to. So relying on that support system.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the next one. Only old people need to talk about death.
Ugh, false. We all need to talk about it because, unless you have a crystal ball, we just don't know when it's our time or when it's the time of someone that we love. And so if we're having these conversations in advance and really thinking about what's important to us, our values and our wishes, and like you said, sharing it with people, it's the sharing it with people that's really important. Then we get to live a freer life now because we know that, the future, there's a plan in place. And, we say this all the time. I'm sure you'd say it with your clients too. It's progress over perfection. What are the little things that you can do now to think about or prepare for the future, whatever that looks like. Doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
gonna jump on that also
yeah,
because it's not just old people. Like I said, I have three teenagers and their kids and our friends are starting to go off to college. And so it's that 18-year-old because if you don't have a power of attorney or a medical proxy and your kid gets into a car accident or ends up in the hospital, you need that. It's also a good way to start the estate planning process. So now all of a sudden at 18, when they really don't have much to talk about or really worry about, you're starting the process to make it normalized to have those conversations. So
I love that. And you're totally right. It is so important. So true or false, money conversations equal conflict.
depends who you ask on that one, but I'm going to go with false because it doesn't need to be. And I'll give a great example. Don't start a money conversation while the person's headed out the door to golf, right? Like, yes, that's going to lead to a conflict because they're going to feel rushed, they're going to feel uncomfortable. Is make the conversation also not um, a shouting match, right?
Yeah,
You do this. I can't believe you overspent on that. Well, guess what? Now my back's up against the wall. Now we're going to have a conflict versus your tone. Tone and timing are really important. So if your tone is, and you're sitting down at a nice place, you're eating breakfast, you're not rushed, is can you share a little bit what happened here? And now all of a sudden you're understanding what happened versus being accusatory. And when you understand what happened, maybe the why, your response might be different. And you can come up together with a solution of how to get working on it together versus against one another.
I love that. True or false, if I talk about it, I'll jinx it.
Ooh. Generally, I'm going to go with false on that one too, right? Like when you talk about things, you want it to be done. I'll give you an example. People tell me all the time, like, I'm just always going to be in debt.
Mm,
That mean I'm going to jinx it? No, that means your mindset is fixed. And just like saying I'm always going to be fat, right? Like that's just a fact, that you've put in your head that's just going to stay there no matter what. So put your money where your mouth is. So if you start saying, like, I'm working on my relationship with money, I'm starting to have the conversations around inheritances, right? You're not jinxing that you're going to die. What you're doing is putting yourself in a place that your legacy lives on in a better light than people being left confused and upset.
I love that.
Thanks. All right, we need to wrap up here.
Yeah.
Love to let everybody know, Marnie, if they need help preparing for death, documentation after death, so many great things that you can help provide. How can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is beginwiththeend.co. And a lot of the times I work with people one on one. I always have a free 20-minute consultation to see how we can work best together. I also have two workbooks that I have on my website. One is a plan well organizer to get all of that important information that we've been talking about into one safe, secure space. And then one on end of life planning 101 workbook, sort of walking through the 7 steps that I consider to be planning for the future in an easeful way. And my email, if anyone wants to reach me, is Marni at beginwiththeend.co. So that's how you find me. And how about you, Erika?
Yeah, best way is on my website, yourfinancialtherapist.com. I have 3 products now on Amazon, 2 called Let's Talk Finances. So they're conversation cards because talking about money is one of the hardest things that people did. They didn't know how to start the conversation. So again, forget
Yes,
about the walk or the drive. There is a couples edition. Let me grab that one. There's a couples edition and a divorce edition. Really, this should be newly singled. So if you are widowed, and it's just how to redefine your own relationship with money. And then I have a book coming out, Conversations with Your Financial Therapist, that is on pre-order.
amazing.
Yep, Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Conversations with Your Financial Therapist. So you can reach me as well through my website, yourfinancialtherapist.com, for a free consultation for 15-20 minutes to see if we're the right fit because I only take motivated clients. So, big thinkers ready to make some shifts in their life. I take select one on one clients and then I do keynotes and corporate work as well. So, I'm glad you and I got a
Amazing.
chance to sit down and have a chat and put it out to the world. So, thank you everybody for making it to the end and look
Yeah.
forward to sitting down with you again soon.
Bye, Erica.
Bye, Marnie.